The Blue Jays just made two moves that nobody saw coming, and one of them could completely change how we view their bullpen heading into spring training. We're talking about a minor league signing that has way more upside than people realize, and an outfield logjam that's about to force Ross Atkins into some serious decisions. This isn't just roster filler. These are legitimate storylines that could define Toronto's 2025 season. Let's start with the name that probably made most of you go, who? When you first heard it, Tanner Andrews. The Blue Jays just signed him to a minor league deal with what's likely an invitation to big league spring training. And before you scroll past this thinking, it's just another organizational depth piece. You need to understand what makes this guy interesting. At 30 years old, Andrews has been grinding through professional baseball since 2018 when the Miami Marlins drafted him. He's bounced around organizations, Marlins, Braves, Giants, Twins, never quite getting that big league opportunity despite flashing legitimate stuff at various points in his career. But here's where it gets intriguing. Andrews spent time in the Atlantic League this past season, pitching for Staten Island, and he was absolutely dominant. 0 ERA across 15 appearances, 25 strikeouts against just 2 walks in 13 and 2/3 innings. 3 saves, that's not just good, that's video game numbers. Performance like that is what gets independent league guys back into affiliated baseball, and it's exactly what earned him a deal with the Minnesota Twins before ultimately landing with Toronto. Now, you might be thinking, okay, he was great in the Atlantic League, but that's not the majors. And you'd be right to be skeptical. Andrews has 7 seasons in the minor leagues under his belt. He's pitched winter ball in Puerto Rico. He's done time in independent leagues. This isn't some 22-year-old prospect we're talking about. This is a guy who's been knocking on the door for years without quite breaking through. In 2024, he posted a 6.95 ERA over 38 games with 76 strikeouts, but also 36 walks before landing on the injured list for 2 months. When he came back, his numbers improved pitching for Wichita in Double-A, but injuries have been a recurring theme throughout his professional career. So why should Blue Jays fans care about this signing? Because Toronto's player development staff has a proven track record of finding these types of arms and unlocking something nobody else saw. Think about the relievers they've turned into contributors over the years. Guys who were cast-offs or organizational depth pieces who suddenly figured something out mechanically or refined their pitch mix and became legitimate bullpen weapons. Andrews has the raw stuff, he always has. His college career at Purdue proved that. 17 wins, 184 strikeouts, helping take the Boilermakers to the NCAA tournament. The talent has always been there. It's just never quite translated consistently at the professional level. What makes his time in Staten Island so significant is that it suggests maybe, just maybe, he's finally put it all together. Maybe he tweaked his mechanics. Maybe he simplified his pitch mix. Maybe he just got healthy for the first time in years, and that allowed everything else to click. The Blue Jays clearly see something here, otherwise they wouldn't be bringing him to spring training. This is a zero-risk, potentially high-reward move. If Andrews comes to camp and shows that his Atlantic League dominance was real, suddenly Toronto has another live arm competing for a bullpen spot. If it doesn't work out, they've lost nothing. The beauty of signings like this is that they cost virtually nothing but provide organizational depth and real competition. Guys like Andrews come to spring training with something to prove. They're hungry, they're motivated, and they know this might be their last real shot at making the majors. That kind of desperation can sometimes produce magic. Will Andrews be the next great Blue Jays bullpen discovery? Probably not. But could he carve out a role as a middle reliever who can get outs and eat innings? Absolutely. And for a team that's trying to build bullpen depth behind their core pieces, that has real value. Now let's shift gears to the situation that's creating some serious headaches for the Blue Jays front office. The outfield logjam. Toronto's outfield situation has gone from having depth to being legitimately overcrowded. And that means somebody's going to have to go. This isn't speculation. This is reality. And the Blue Jays are being heavily linked to impact outfielders like Stephen Kwan from the Guardians and are in the mix for elite free agents like Kyle Tucker. You cannot add another impact outfield bat without subtracting someone currently on the roster. The math just doesn't work. So who's on the potential trade block? Three names keep coming up in conversations both inside and outside the organization: Davis Schneider, Joey Loperfido, and Jonathan Klaas. Each of these guys represents a different type of trade asset. Schneider might be the most valuable of the bunch because he's already proven he can contribute at the major league level, and his versatility makes him attractive to multiple teams. He can play multiple outfield positions. He's shown he can hit major league pitching, and he's still young enough that teams would view him as part of their future rather than just a short-term rental. If Toronto decides to move Schneider, they could get a legitimate return that helps them elsewhere on the roster. Loperfido is fascinating because his sample size in the majors was tiny but incredibly productive. He hit .333 with a .379 on base percentage and an .879 slugging percentage in 96 at-bats. Those are numbers that jump off the page. Teams are always looking for players who can turn potential into immediate production. And when a guy puts up those kinds of numbers, even in a limited sample, his trade value shoots up. Some team is going to convince themselves they're getting a steal if they can acquire Loperfido before he breaks out fully. Then there's Jonathan Klaas, who's just 23 years old. His brief time in the majors wasn't great, but his age and athletic tools alone make him valuable. He's the type of player rebuilding teams drool over because they have time to develop him and see if they can unlock something special. He might not bring back a star in a trade, but he'd absolutely generate interest from multiple teams looking for young, toolsy outfielders. But here's where it gets complicated. The elephant in the room is Addison Barger. Barger had a strong season, and his market value has skyrocketed. He'd be the most enticing centerpiece in any trade package Toronto could put together. But every indication suggests the Blue Jays view him as untouchable. He's seen as part of the future, a versatile player who can fill multiple roles and grow alongside the team's core. That makes him the quiet piece that nobody expects to actually get moved. With Barger off the table, the picture becomes clearer. Schneider, Loperfido, and Klaas are the logical candidates to create roster space. And this isn't just about clearing room on the 40-man roster. This is about strategic roster construction. If the Blue Jays are serious about landing Stephen Kwan or pursuing Kyle Tucker, they need to show other teams they're willing to move valuable pieces to make it happen. Holding on to everyone and hoping it works out isn't a realistic strategy. The real question facing Ross Atkins and the front office is what type of return they want. Do they trade one of these guys for major league-ready talent that can contribute immediately? Do they look for high upside prospects who might not help for a couple years? Or do they use one of these outfielders as part of a larger package to land a true star? Each approach has merit, and each approach carries risk. What makes this situation so compelling is the urgency. The Blue Jays can't just sit on this logjam and hope it resolves itself. Other teams know Toronto needs to move someone, which potentially weakens their negotiating position. But at the same time, when you have multiple assets that other teams covet, you maintain leverage because you can pick and choose your trade partner. This is high-level roster chess, and how it plays out over the next few weeks could determine whether the Blue Jays take a real step forward or remain stuck in neutral. So where does all this leave us? The Tanner Andrews signing is the kind of low-risk move that could pay dividends if everything breaks right. The outfield situation is the kind of roster crunch that forces action. One of these stories is about adding depth and taking a flyer on potential. The other is about making hard decisions to reshape the roster for a legitimate playoff push. Both matter. Both will play out over the coming weeks as we get closer to spring training. The Blue Jays offseason is far from over, and things are about to get very interesting.